part of this exhibition dates from the 17th century or earlier. Limestone was also used later. For example, the concept of limestone functionalism, which dates from the 1930s, is unique to Tallinn. The next two halls have been named the Garden of Eden. In the first one, you will see stones decorated with plants, and in the second, with Adams and Eves, or human figures. You will certainly notice the stone canopy hanging from the ceiling like a chandelier. St. Nicholas's Church is one of Tallinn's two largest churches, and this grand canopy was located above the medieval baptism stone of the church, dedicated to St. Nicholas. On the wall, there are also basins for washing one's hands. The largest of these also originates from St. Nicholas's Church. However, similar smaller ones could be found in the homes of local citizens, and therefore these stone wash basins are the precursors of today's ceramic sinks. If you were at the zoo instead of at the museum, the guide could point to the mythological building in a wall niche and ask, "What animal is that?" The smartest among you would answer, "This is a mythical water creature called the Triton, who has the body of a man and the tail of a fish." However, the animal with a woman's body and a fish's tail is called a mermaid. Numerous pairs of eyes look back at you from the walls of the second room in the Garden of Eden. These human figures have decorated doorways or fireplaces. It may seem that decorated carved stones are only found in churches, town halls, and castles. However, the window columns in this hall mostly originate from the residences of the city's most wealthy citizens. Therefore, the coats of arms or family insignias of the master or lady of the house were often depicted on the capital of the column. Most of them date from the 17th century, and they were located inside the houses. A typical townhouse was divided in two: the front room, Odieli, and back room, or Dornsa. The Dornsa was the living room, the large windows of which were decorated with carved stone faces, and a large column in the middle that supported the vault or beam that bridged the window. Some of the columns may have rested on the shoulders of lions, like the one you can see in the next hall. If most of the columns and other carved stones in the display have a natural gray stone surface, then originally they were multicolored, ornamented, or even gilded. Therefore, imagine for a moment that all the stones you see here are colored. In this room, we see old stone posts or ornamental stones with epigraphs or carvings. They were located on the street on either side of the main entrances to the houses. A bench where people could sit was installed between the posts or stones and the facade. An imposing post or ornamental stone indicated the owner's status and beliefs. For instance, take a look at the stones with the words "Du Segen Makrik" written on them. What does this mean? These Low German words mean "a blessing makes one rich." The Estonian words "rik," state, and "rikas," rich, also have the same Germanic origin. However, this saying should be interpreted to mean that the merchant who lived in the house had not raked in his riches, but is blessed by God. However, in the early 19th century, the posts or stones, which sometimes extended several meters onto the street, started to interfere with the traffic on Tallinn's narrow streets. Some of the stones were repurposed as gravestones, and it could happen that the family insignia of a 15th or 16th century merchant appeared on the gravestone of an Estonian workman who died in the 19th century. Some of the stones were walled into the house facades or used as construction materials. In some places in modern-day Tallinn, the old posts or stones have been reconstructed as copies, for example on Lai Street, in front of the Tallinn City Theatre, or on Pig Street in front of the History Museum. However, these stones have never actually Before you start to descend the stairs from this higher level, one important notice, namely, this is where the wall is that sealed off the former section of the passage almost 100 years ago. The reason was that the lower section tended to flood, and the passageways filled with water because the drainage canals had been filled in or were destroyed during the 19th century. The wall that for so long hid the rest of the tunnel was not opened until 2004. And that's why these walls and vaults have retained their original appearance. After the Great Northern War, which ended in Estonia in 1710, these passageways were also used as a prison. It is believed that during the reign of Catherine the Great, Father Arseny Matsievich, the Metropolitan of Rostov and Yaroslavl, and the former bishop of the Russian Orthodox Church, was imprisoned here. It is more likely, though, that Father Arseny spent the last 4 years of his life in a small cell in the Haryu Gate Tower. Arseny was once an important cleric who had a solo fight against Empress Catherine's plans to confiscate the church's land. However, the Empress destroyed Arseny, stripped him of his titles and honors, and sent the 71-year-old insurgent to Tallinn under the name of Andrei Vral, or the Liar. He was not allowed to communicate with anyone because it was feared that he might provoke people with his words. The former cleric died on February 28, 1772, and was buried without honors in the current St. Nicholas's Orthodox Church on Vene Street. Arseny Matsievich was canonized in the early 2000s by the Orthodox Church. I am Magnus, and I'm a military guard. I keep watch over a prison whom the government has classified as secret, and I shouldn't be telling you that Arseny was held right here. He wasn't allowed to speak to anyone, and I didn't understand much of his Greek or Russian mutterings. I only speak the local language and know about 10 German commands. However, people say that Arseny really did not like our Madam Empress much, for she was a German and a woman, and not a true Russian Orthodox believer. I will say, however, that when Arseny died, the following words were found scratched into the wall of his cell. Thank you, my lord, for having me humbled. You have arrived at the top of the Bastion. That is, you've covered half its length. In 1857, when Tallinn, then called Revel, was deleted from the list of earthwork fortifications in the Tsarist state, the huge territory occupied by the fortifications were transferred to the city's civil authorities. A green park landscape surrounding the old town was established on the old fortifications, with walks and a circular boulevard. The citizenry liked this because it was fashionable to enjoy the greenery and stroll in the parks, to be seen by others and to see them. A popular gathering place, a real entertainment center for the city residents, was established on the Ingria Bastion, or Haryu Gate Hill, where you are right now. There was a summer theater and music pavilion, as well as a cafe-restaurant. In September of 1889, Charles Leroux took off in a balloon from the Bastion, crowded with spectators. Leroux jumped out of the balloon with a parachute. However, the wind unfortunately carried him out to sea, and the brave aviator was drowned. When I was a child, as you see me here, in the early 20th century, a schoolboy in the age of Tsar Nicholas with his friend, I liked to climb on the old fortification. Who wouldn't? We'd heard stories that a passageway to St. Bridget's convent was somewhere around here. And one secret passage led to the bank's gold chamber. And the longest tunnel even reached Helsinki. And somewhere here, treasure or weapons were hidden. And it was these Bastion passageways that fed these fantasies, along with the adventure writing of the day. However, this vast labyrinth described in the newspapers, from which there is no escape, never existed. More likely, these stories had been intended to frighten people, to prevent them from getting lost or falling and getting killed in the passageways. At least, we never found any labyrinth or secret passages. Maybe you will. But be careful not to hit your head, because the ceiling of the passageway gets very low from here on. In the 1950s, during the Cold War, civil defense shelters were established in the passageways that were supposed to provide the population shelter and protection in the case of a nuclear attack. The Bastion passageways were supposed to provide the residents shelter for at least 2 days and nights. The doors closed hermetically, and a system of charcoal and oil filters were supposed to ensure clean air. The first stone tile floors were installed for the nuclear shelter. Previously, there had just been a sandy surface. Luckily, there was no need to actually seek shelter from a nuclear attack. Soviet Estonia was separated from Western countries by the so-called Iron Curtain. At that time, Western influences were considered ideologically harmful. And yet, Western pop culture, including punk music, still found its way in, especially through Finnish TV. In the 1980s, there were also lots of heavy metal and breakdancing fans among the young people who were trying to rebel against the mainstream. And there were also old hippies about. But punk was very popular. The young punks, with their homemade hairdos and strange clothes, were quite a lively sight for ordinary people. A group of teenage punks, who came from broken families or had escaped from orphanages, lived in the Bastion passageways. Some of them were simply seeking some excitement in their lives. The nest of the punk commune was located in the Swedish Bastion next door, where they slept in bunk beds. From time to time, the residents of the passageways were disturbed by police raids. When they invaded the passageways with their units to capture the punks, the latter had to escape to the Ingrid Bastion. From here, they could escape through the shelter door to freedom. I am Punk Piggy. The authorities did not like punks. It was thought that we undermined the foundations of society and that we offended the dignity of the Soviet people. The police even apprehended young people that looked like punk rockers on the street and took them off to the stations, where they sometimes used violence against them. Some were even locked up for a few weeks. But life in the passageways was cultured. Toilets and water were even installed. A hot water pipe also ran through the passageway, so it was quite warm. During the day, we hung around in the city and searched for food and drink. The evenings were best when there was a punk rock concert somewhere. But punks were not all alike. Some were gentle-souled poets. Others were pretty tough guys. In town, we sometimes relieved some vain guy of his trainers. Loka and Tallinn were the oldest. Loka was a crazy guy who was always itching for a fight. He didn't hold back when a fight was brewing. Tallinn was his girlfriend, and she could restrain Loka when necessary. In any case, Loka always stood up for us. We were like a family. In 1857, Tsar Alexander II issued an order that Tallinn, which was called Revel at the time, be removed from the list of earthwork fortifications. Only a few years earlier, during the Crimean War, when the English warships had sailed into Tallinn Bay, the bastions had been prepared for battle, but were thereafter abandoned. The passageways were used as bomb shelters during World War II and during the Soviet era, when even Tallinn could be threatened by a nuclear attack. At the beginning of the new century, the passageways started to be researched and cleaned. The photos show what awaited the archaeologists and scientists there.